Well, hello everybody. It's 2 o'clock, so the meeting of the Audit Committee today of the 14th of January will start. Can I just start by saying Happy New Year to you all, since I haven't seen you all since the end of last year, and I hope you had a good Christmas. Let's start with apologies for absence, please.
We've had no apologies.
Thank you very much. What I'd just like to do is just check who else we've got here for the record, so that we and anyone watching the live feed will know who's here. Perhaps you could introduce yourselves, starting on my far left.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm Andrew Wathen. I'm the Chief Internal Auditor.
Hello, Joy Robson. I'm Head of Finance.
And you're...
Nicola Perry, Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, let's go from the front table, from my right to left.
Okay, I'm Dave Wilson from Wales Audit Office.
Steve Wyndham from the Wales Audit Office.
Richard Cope, Business Manager, Passenger Transport.
And I think we've got 2 non-committee members in the body of the meeting. One over there.
Hazel Owlett, Scrutiny Manager.
And the councillor at the back.
Councillor Val Smith, observing. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Right, thank you very much. Are you bothered, Councillor?
I just wonder if you're doing the committee members.
It's not necessary, because you're on the list of people attending, which is available to people logging into the web page. Okay, thanks very much. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. We normally take those as they come item by item, but if anybody wants to speak up now, please feel free.
Could I just make a point on that, Chairman, if I may? That the advice that we've had as members is that if you have a declaration of interest to make, you do it at the start of the meeting. And at the time of the, whatever the declaration of interest item is as well.
If members wish to do it that way, that's absolutely fine with me. I have found it convenient in the past that as an item comes up, people say what their interest is. But nevertheless, if members need to make a declaration at the start of the meeting, then that's fine with me. Okay, well, the next item on the agenda is the public open forum. I don't believe we've got any members of the public present, so I'll move on. Let's confirm the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any comments or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting?
Prepared to move them, Chairman.
Do we have an agreement on that? Yes, Councillor.
Just a quick question, Chairman. On the public forum, a member of the public, it's got to be 3-4 months ago now, asked questions about Chepstow School and is still inquiring as to whether he will receive an answer.
That is indeed on the action list, and I'll have a couple of things to say about that later. Yes, Councillor Prosser.
Yes, I was absent, but I had sent my apologies. I'm not listed as having sent them on the minutes.
Okay, we can make that amendment, I think. Right, thank you very much. Let's move on to the action list of the previous meeting, which was the one held on the 3rd of December. Okay, now the first one is the information, or further information on early departures and vacant posts, which we'd asked Mr. Davis for. He has provided some more information. It apparently was timed at 9:30 this morning, so quite late on for us to be able to take that on and respond to it. I suppose what I want to know is whether the information supplied does answer the queries that the committee had. But in any case, I'm prepared to hold that over for next time to see whether you want to come back to me later. Are there any views on that? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have had a chance to have a look at it, albeit not in any great detail. It does seem on first reading to be quite comprehensive, gives quite a lot of detail. So I think we can probably digest it at our leisure and perhaps discuss it at the next meeting.
Maybe we'll just leave the item on the agenda then, and if you've got any queries next time, we'll take them then. Is that all right with everyone? Yep, good. Okay, thank you. We've got the point just made by Councillor Petrini, the MCC response to issues raised by a member of the public. Now, what I was told in writing before this meeting from Mr. Davis is that Mr. Davis said he knew that Cass Sheen was providing an update regarding the Mr. Rees queries regarding Chepstow School, and he said, if I have time ahead of the committee, I'll look to provide an updated response, although this will very much depend on my ability to get advice on a couple of matters in the morning. Now, what he's just done is come to see me 2 minutes before this meeting began to say that he thinks a response is imminent. I've also received, just opened it now, a letter from Mr. Rees wanting to know what the answers were to the queries he raised. So I am very much hoping that the imminent response we've been promised will be the response that Mr. Rees is asking for. Again, we'll leave that on the action points and check that that's been acted on next time. It's been dragging on a while, but I realise there are wider implications for the council in this than just for this committee. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Third item, unsatisfactory audit opinions from the passenger transport unit. Mr. Cope is here, and there is an agenda item later on. Unsatisfactory audit opinions from Monmouthshire Enterprises. I understand the person who was working on a response to this has had some sick leave, and they asked me if we could postpone it till next time, and I agreed. Okay. That leaves us with the item relating to the Welsh Audit Office proposals for improvement, further information required regarding allocation of funding for NEETs and Inspire to Achieve. We did receive a note on this a few days ago. Some definitional points, I think. I'm sure it's in my pack somewhere. If you'll bear with me a moment. Ah, yes, it's the note dated 6th of January about the ESF programme Inspire to Achieve and Inspire to Work. Did everyone receive that, that explanation? Again, I suppose what I want to know is whether the committee thinks that that answers the query that was raised.
I didn't have any points on it, Chair.
Okay, well, if there are no other points then... Okay, well, we'll accept that as dealt with. Right, thanks very much. Okay, so we wanted to receive a response to the internal audit opinion from the passenger transport unit manager. So I understand that Mr. Cope is here and he is able to respond to the points raised point by point. So I'll turn over the issues to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go through the points from the last Audit Committee minutes of the points picked up by the audit section. The first one being vehicle procurement was not openly advertised as required prior to the selection process taking place. I think we've had discussions on this issue before. We now advertise them via Sell to Wales, although it has meant a large reduction in the number of interested parties because a lot of used sales firms won't go through the process of registering and putting all the actual paperwork in, because there's a lot of paperwork on electronic tendering that they need to fill in, and a lot of them just won't bother because they can go and sell it to somebody else, down the road. But that's the process we have to administer to. We have done it, and as I said, the first one went out, but we did have a very, very poor response, unfortunately. We have got a member of staff as well who's doing procurement exams. He's almost completed the first year of his course to become a fully qualified procurement officer. So that will help us in taking all this forward in the future. Second point, the process for selecting successful suppliers of used vehicles was not open and transparent. We've developed a matrix for this, for providing us with transparency and for marking vehicles when we go to look at them. We we looked at this on the first instance, 70% price and 30% quality. But of course, you also have to take into consideration life running costs, etc. So all that was put into the matrix. We have found that it could be a little bit misconstrued, really, because if you go out and you ask for a vehicle that's no lot more than 5 years old, one tender might come back in with a vehicle that is just under 5 years old. Another tender might come back in and a vehicle is perhaps a year old. The difference in the price on those quite often outweighs anything that you would put in on quality. So you could end up with the lower priced vehicle, but it's not necessarily the best quality and the best one in the running cost. So we have to look at the actual percentage breakdown on that to make sure that we get the best value for the authority.
If I could just interrupt there quickly. I'm conscious that many questions will be raised as you go through this point by point. I've already had a request for an interjection from Councillor Higginson, so what I'm going to do is allow questions as you go along.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. And I think it's well known what my thoughts are, and I appreciate the comments that Richard made as to how cumbersome and that it can be. Appreciating it is a requirement, but how cumbersome some of these procurement requirements are. But the question I want to ask, if I may, is how detrimental is that to the passenger transport unit's operation, given the procurement is time consuming?
The issue we have is that if you have a used vehicle, for instance, and we go out and buy a second-hand vehicle, it's there at the time it is there. By the time we go out to procure it via Sell to Wales, the process takes probably a month or more. The problem we have as well now is the OJU limit has just been reduced from 172 down to 162,000, which means that most of the things that we go out for will be over the OJU limit, which means then you have to give 56 days notice, I think it is, in the interim before you can actually issue the tender. Well, by the time you do that, those vehicles will be sold. And then you'll have a new batch of vehicles coming in which may not actually suit your requirements. So that is the issue that we have with it.
Can I come back on that, if I may? Okay, fine, and this is a matter for audit and maybe the Wales Audit Office as well. Given that could be prejudicial to the operation of a passenger transport unit, and I use that word cautiously, but I think it could be prejudicial to the requirements of the passenger transport unit. Is there any way that the procurement can be adapted to suit the requirements of the passenger transport unit? I leave it, and I just leave it at that level. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know whether that's a question for the passenger transport unit or really a question for audit.
Well, I did say audit, or even the Wales Audit, or possibly Mr. Roger Hoggins.
Yes, Mr. Hoggins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a matter which we are dealing with public money, aren't we? So we have to be clear on how we do it and transparent how we're doing it. Yeah, we have to match that against getting. The very fact that we're looking for used vehicles is because we think we can get better value for money in the first place. So I know there's been ongoing debate between Richard and audit colleagues about how to do this, and perhaps we can go back to that and see what flexibility we can build into it while still offering the transparency which we're looking for.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just add to that a minute, perhaps put the question more directly than Jim did? Have you got a way that is open and transparent that would solve your problem over missing out on the good deals? It's how close are we to finding a way which is acceptable to both camps, if you like?
Whoever wants to respond to that.
None of us by the looks of it. But I think it's a piece of work which we still got to do. We haven't done that. It has recognised, Richard's mentioned it to me previously about the obstacles which it's putting in the way, and yet we can see whilst it's been put forward as good practice. So we're going to have to find our way. I haven't got it yet. Well, that's a piece of work which we need to do.
I could just come back, Chair, because it really sticks in my craw that if we're losing out on good vehicles at advantageous prices just because of ticking boxes, we've got to find a way around that.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. The difficulty we're in is that if we're nearing the OJ limits, then we've got to comply with the OJ legislation. If we were buying buses at a lower level, which Richard has done in the past, and comply with our own contract standing orders, then we can go through an exemption process. So it does depend on the value of the buses that are being purchased. But if we're getting anywhere near the OJ limits, then that's out of our hands. The council can't claim an exemption against OJ limits. That is European legislation which all councils need to comply with.
Councillor Petrini.
You may have already mentioned this. We can't be the only council experiencing this problem. I'm just wondering, have you spoken to colleagues who maybe have dealt with a similar issue and have come to a, do we have to reinvent the wheel because someone else already thought of a solution?
Thanks, Councillor. Unfortunately, there's not many councils that run their own vehicles of this size, because a lot of them run fleet vehicles, but they renew them with new vehicles all the time. Because of the cost of the coaches that we buy, if you go out and buy new, you're talking up to 300,000 a time. Well, over the cost period of the time that we run them, we need to find better value than that at some stage. So obviously we have to go to second hand, and we've looked at all other authorities. None of them can come up with any frameworks or anything for second hand vehicles at all.
Yeah, follow up from Councillor.
Sorry, is that England and Wales, or just Welsh authorities?
No, I went through our procurement colleagues as well to try and put it through the network of procurement officers within local authorities, and nobody has come up with a second-hand framework anywhere in the country.
Councillor Jordan.
Yes, I was going to ask whether you always start from the premise that second-hand is best value. I know that you've got a substantial capital cost for new vehicles, but could you not set that off against leasing charges?
We have looked at new vehicles. One of the issues we do have with new vehicles is the procurement frameworks that are out there, because there's not enough suppliers on them, and the only suppliers that are on them have the high-end cost vehicles. Unfortunately, I mean, if we could go outside of those frameworks, maybe buying new in certain areas would be okay. But currently, the frameworks have only got like 3 or 4 suppliers on them, and they're all a lot of the higher cost vehicles, and some of them are not really what we require.
Okay, but somebody must make them, because we're buying second-hand versions of the lower...
Yeah, they do, but of course, when you go out for new, you only have a certain number of firms that are on that procurement framework. Now, the Welsh procurement framework and the Crown procurement framework only has, I think it's 3 suppliers on them, which supply coaches. Because a lot of local authorities don't buy coaches and PSV vehicles, it's not like going out for HGVs, because every authority will buy HGV vehicles because of their works departments, but not all of them will buy coaches. So the coach companies don't go on to these frameworks because they don't get enough call for them. That's the problem we have.
Well, it's certainly opened an avenue of questioning. So if you would like to continue, please.
Okay, the third one was mechanical inspection of second-hand vehicles not adequately evidenced. Obviously, that's within the matrix now. We evidence that throughout the matrix as well. So that's part and parcel of that. It was unclear during the review if the use of external maintenance for some maintenance was a cost-effective solution for the authority. We have for a long time stated that we would like to bring maintenance in-house, but we don't have the facilities to do this. To comply with Traffic Commission regulations and DVSA regs. We have to get this done externally currently because we don't have the facilities in-house. We'd welcome a new depot facility which would, incorporate maintenance facilities, but it's not proving very easy to find at an affordable cost. The next one was a maintenance contract above EU procurement thresholds was signed without any tender process taking place. This was a contract extension of a previous contract that was signed and it was signed to conform with DVSA and traffic commissioner requirements, basically. The tender, if it went out for it, would probably not reach the EU threshold because the only known elements of it would be the inspection of the vehicles. We wouldn't know what spare parts we would require or what work would be required on those vehicles until they've had that actual inspection. So we could only actually tender probably for the inspections for those vehicles, which would probably not reach that threshold. But we have discussed this with procurement, and we're working on a suitable tender document now, which we can send out then for the future. Basically to try and find a way around how we do this, because obviously the number of vehicle inspections per year we can work out on 28-day schedules, that's fine, but to know exactly what we're going to spend moving forward, it's an unknown, because you don't know whether you're going to buy a gearbox or you're going to buy, certain things. You're only going to know what you're doing on the servicing side and the inspection side. One vehicle was identified which was not serviced in the required time frame but remained operational. This was a vehicle that had been presented to Raglan for its inspection. It was a minibus, but for some reason it's not been inspected and was subsequently given back to us for use. What we've done there now is that it was one of our permit vehicles, not part of our road licence. But we put in new check-in systems in place for this. Transport were holding the records for this, for all the inspections for those. What we're asking for now, we're requesting a copy of the inspection report to come back with the vehicle as and when it's been inspected, so that we know that that vehicle has definitely been inspected and it can go back on our records. And we've got a double check-in system within our depot to say it's gone in and it's come back out, and we've got the inspection records. There was no system in place to actively monitor individual vehicle maintenance costs to inform future budgetary and vehicle replacement decisions. There was some costs identified through the Aggresso system, but they weren't particularly clear. You could perhaps drill them down by going into different sort of categories. But what we've done now is we set up a full monitoring system whereby all the costs could go in against vehicles on a spreadsheet. We've had an independent audit carried out as well by Lloyd Morgan Group, who do independent audits on vehicle maintenance. And we actually had two done. We had one done probably about over 12 months ago, and we had one done in October last year. And the second one that we've had done now has given us 100% compliance on all our maintenance records, all our vehicle inspections, that are all going into date, and that everything, all the paperwork is in place. We have all the policies in place and all the procedures in place that cover us for that. And they've done that audit, and I can share that with audit as well now that we've had the report back. It's 100% that we've completely cleared that. Next one, information could not be provided on sample of private hire bookings selected as information related to those bookings not being retained. Within this, it's not perhaps a complete story. Some of the samples that were asked for were not private hire bookings. They were for buses that we use for training pupils. On our CTX system, it'll show all the vehicles that go out during the day, and that obviously they picked those off the system, but they were for training purposes, and obviously they're not a private hire, so we couldn't give them any information on that. And also then try to explain to the auditor that all our bookings would be via email.
Richard Jones, Policy and Performance Officer.
Okay, thank you. So, Chair, with your permission, I'll just say a few brief words, at which point I think the real value to the committee probably of this or a number of areas is that you have David Wilson from Wales Audit Office here, who's one of the authors of this report, that will be able to give some more detail as well. But just to give a little bit of background, the purpose of the report is to provide Audit Committee with a copy of the corporate assessment, something which Wales Audit Office carry out every 4 years on all local authorities. Ours was carried out in March 2015 and the report published in November 2015. So what you see before you today is the report itself, and also the authority's response to that in the shape of a high-level action plan. Now, the detail of this is integrated into our standard performance management arrangements and will be through the coming year. So you don't see every element of the detail here, but hopefully it gives committee enough of an idea of the area of progress we're going in. And clearly, myself and Richard are here and can elaborate a little more on any of the details as you wish to explore them. So just to be clear then, we've got the report itself, an action plan which also summarises some of the key issues from the document. Yeah, as an authority, there are local authorities, Wales Audit Office can make sort of 4 different tiers of recommendations, and they're set out on para 3.2 of the report, from the lower level proposals of improvement to the higher level recommendation to ministers of Welsh Government. So our corporate assessment, Wales Audit Office made 9 proposals for improvement, which are the sort of the lower level of recommendations, but nonetheless for us, it was an incredibly valuable report which has provided us with insight which the authority is looking at and responding to. The report was also presented to Cabinet earlier this month, and David was also present at that meeting to elaborate. So, Chair, with your permission, available for questions throughout, but I'll pass over to David Wilson to give views.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Just in terms of the report itself, if I can just say a few words about that before we start. As Matt said, this is the annual improvement report and the corporate assessment report. Both are the findings are integrated within there. The difference between them is that the annual improvement report is based on the work done by ourselves during the year since the last year's improvement report, and that of other relevant regulators, as in ESTIN, CSSIW and the Welsh Language Commissioner. The conclusion of the annual improvement report is that based on the work of the Wales Audit Office and the relevant regulators, ESTIN, CSSIW and Welsh Language Commissioner, the Auditor General considers that it is uncertain whether Monmouthshire will comply with the requirements of the local government measure during 2015. I just want to draw your attention to paragraph 12 within the report that says that a significant factor resulting in the Auditor General's conclusion that it is uncertain whether Monmouthshire will comply with the requirements of the local government measure during 2015-16 is that the Council's education services for children and young people still require special measures. So that was a significant factor in the conclusion. Now, within the report itself, as Matt said, we also report on the corporate assessment, which is an assessment that takes place on a 4-year cycle covering all Wales councils. Before I get to the conclusion on that, I think it's important to say that we have reported both in the same document, and this has undoubtedly delayed the production of the report. We're a learning organisation, and what we've learnt from that is that in future we will not report these two in the same document. These two will be separate reports, but for this occasion, it's the same document. So just turning to the corporate assessment, the conclusion from the corporate assessment is that the Council demonstrates ambition in its vision, enthusiasm to deliver and commitment to working collaboratively, but needs to be supported by clearly joined up strategic approach and effective delivery mechanisms. And if you look at paragraphs 5 to 7, I'm not going to go through all of those paragraphs, but if you look at the content of those paragraphs, it gives more detail as to what we mean by effective delivery mechanisms. The Council, as Matt has explained, the Council's response to the report is included on the agenda. We'll be taking account of this as we complete follow-on work over the next few months. And in those particular areas, we'll be looking at performance management, governance, human resources and information technology. So we'll be taking account of what's in the action plan there in terms of how the Council is progressing with these areas. That's about as much as I want to say at this stage, but I'm quite happy to take questions.
All right, comments and observations, everybody. I have to just observe that it took me a lot longer to read read those documents than that introduction, and I'm sure you've all found the same experience. But Councillor Petrini.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I believe you might remember me from Cabinet, maybe you don't. I read this document in depth, and I raised it at Cabinet, and I'm going to raise it again about your analysis or findings on performance and accountability and governance. And I refer to the document itself that you've highlighted. So page 5, I think it's item 7, it says, while system procedures are guidance in place, the Council is not consistently managing performance, improvement and risks. It's not always able to demonstrate impact or quantify improved outcomes. And on page 19, which is, I won't repeat here, but basically it gives you a gist that there is evidence that the data quality is not as robust as it could be. I know it's a small sample size, I remember you saying. But there's 3 paragraphs there that basically criticise about the performance, poor data quality, and not giving members the sufficient data to scrutinise effectively, I suppose. And that gives me great concern. And I remember raising with you at the time about how the Council's response to this, which I've read in detail, as you well know, and that on page 16 or page 32 on electronic copy, it says internal audit appropriately to focus on the data systems underpinning the data to try and improve the robustness of the data. And I raised with you then that internal audit have been swamped in recent years, have been understaffed in recent years. And if you, the report on actually about Q3 shows internal audit are already down on the performance from last year's quarter already. They're on 40% as opposed to 47%. So if internal audit are going to assess accurate performance and they're busy themselves, how can you reassure me that we're going to increase the robustness of the data that we're seeing?
Okay. Well, I think it's probably fair to say that it's for the Council to reassure you that it's going to improve the robustness of its data. So Matt may want to say something about that. The action plan covers the proposals for improvement. You're quite right that we did raise quite a few concerns in the report about how the Council manages its performance. That goes back to setting out clearly how it's going to manage the improvement. If you go back to the improvement plan, we've looked at the quality of the targets and the actions that are being taken and how those will contribute to the delivery of the improvement. When you talk about quantifying the impact, unless there are clear targets that show the level of improvement that the Council expects to see, then you as members and senior managers will not be able to hold officers to account, because you can't be sure what they were going to achieve in the first place and as to whether they've actually done that. The third point that you raised was about data quality. And again, I do remember the discussion we had at Cabinet over this. We did take a small sample where we tested the data quality. We did find some concerns around there where data was being estimated in terms of reporting to you the actual performance, and that isn't performance reporting. There was one of the performance indicators where the closing date was the 31st of May for all the data to be in the systems and the information to be collected. When we ran a report after May to see what information had gone through, we found evidence that some information had gone through after May. Therefore, that wasn't included in your performance information. And one of the other areas that we were concerned about was the level of supporting information to show that the data were actually robust. So you're right, we did raise some concerns about data quality, but I would like to keep that in context that it was only a small sample that we checked, but 3 out of 6 that we checked we found problems with. Your question around internal audit and their work programme. I can't really comment on whether the work programme's up to date or not, but I accept what you say, that it isn't up to date. The Council uses its internal audit section to check some of the performance, the quality, some of the data quality. Our work is over and above that, just to do our own sample to satisfy ourselves. So I can't really comment on internal audit being behind, but I think we've got the internal auditor in the room. So. I don't know.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to ask Mr. Gatehouse to respond on the data quality issue. Okay, if you want to put in a supplementary.
I presume the WAO will come back and check the council robustness of their actions, presumably in the future. So we'll be able to. You'll be giving us an independent assessment of their actions in the future, I hope.
Oh, absolutely. One of the pieces of work that we've got over the next few months is performance management, as I said. One of the areas that we'll be looking at within that performance management piece of work is data quality. We will be going back to the 3 performance indicators that we had concerns about last year, although 2 of the 3 are no longer included in the improvement plan. They've dropped out. But we will be testing the one that remains within the plan, and we've chosen 6 more to examine. So we will be doing some more. But again, it is only a small sample. The council needs to assure itself that its data quality is accurate.
Mr. Gatehouse on data quality.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And yeah, thanks for the questions, Councillor Petruni. If I start on the point of sort of data quality and internal audit. Previously, I mean, we commissioned as a section, you know, as all sections of the authority do, there's a certain amount of capacity from internal audit that we can draw on, and that's finite. You know, that's the organisation we are and the resource we have available to us. What we're doing this year, and this work hasn't been commissioned yet, it's part of the sort of 2016-17 audit plan, is to adjust the focus of the work which internal audit do. So when we work with internal audit and draft a brief on how that work will be included, it's a change in emphasis away from some of the paperwork and checking of printouts towards helping us with more work with scrutiny of systems. So actually moving some of that work closer to the type of testing which Wales Audit Office have done to identify these problems. The Audit Committee may be aware that we have sort of reports of both nationally produced or national and local PIs. Both of those last year came with an internal control rating of good. So we went into this exercise with a degree of confidence around the quality of data. Wales Audit Office did the sample check. 6 measures, 3 were found to have problems, and they were right in terms of those findings, and we recognise we need to improve on those issues, and hence we will adjust the brief. In terms of the particular ones, is 2 of those have been dropped, and I think what we've looked at, they were volume indicators, so number of people doing, to give an indication of activity. So as we're looking to make changes, we want to be able to evidence that the impact and the outcome is linked to some activity. So what we've done is sample people attending events. I think we recognise now that perhaps rather than sampling, it may have been better not to have included that indicator in the first place in terms of what it means for citizens. Yeah, we're not talking around the sorts of sort of key issues around delivery and outcome. The particular instance that David mentioned around timeliness of recording is one of recording on the social services system, where there's been a delay in the input of some information onto the system, often where data is entered by admin after the event. And I think this is the sort of issue that by adjusting our internal audit brief, we can get that additional check on a regular basis to ensure that those issues are addressed. As members will be aware, social services are now moving to the new database, or move to the new database plant, which hopefully will make that recording and capture of data far easier for social workers. So actually in investing in that system, the authority has enabled social workers to spend far less time at their desk. And we've worked with social workers on developing a system that means they can spend far more time in communities and far less time at a desk on these recording issues. So it's a system designed with and by the social workers to enable that sort of data capture to be as effective as possible. I think on the issue of targets, clearly targets are something which are set by members, you know, generally as part of the improvement plan. What we've seen in terms of the work that David and colleagues at Wales Audit Office done in looking at our improvement plan is in terms of the feedback we've received, and some will be coming to Audit Committee in the near future, is an improvement over the last 2 years of that feedback. Last year, for the first time, we carried out a target of audit to address some of the issues which Wales Audit Office had identified. So that audit then was brought back through to Cabinet to have some assurance around the robustness of targets. But I would say to you as members that that's an area of responsibility for council, part of the improvement plan. And if as members you feel the targets being put before you are not sufficiently stretching and challenging, please talk to us about those targets, talk to the chief officers, because those are something which are a responsibility of the whole council.
I don't know if internal audit want to make a contribution.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thanks for your comments, Councillor. I think, as you all appreciate, that I do have a finite limit of resources, but we do get involved with the auditing of the performance indicators on an annual basis. And it is quite tight in terms of the timescales we've got and the deadlines we've got. By the time that the indicators are calculated at the year end, the data is pulled together, and the date in which the data has to be sent off by certain deadlines, which is the same for all local authorities. Our remit up to now has been to make sure that the definition per each indicator that we look at has been accepted and is correct. So in compiling the data for a particular performance indicator, we ensure that the collator of that information is adhered to the definition as set out in that performance indicator. But we only do that on a sample basis. So we work with Matthew and Richard to make sure that the data is as robust as possible, but we can't sample all the performance indicators at any one given time. Those that we did go through, we were quite happy that there was a proper process in place and that the definition for the indicators we looked at had been properly complied with. And if Matthew wants to change the scope moving forward, then we're quite happy to work with Matthew on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Higginson, you had a query.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just one question I have is, and I'm surprised at this, I have to say, and to reconsider the council's policy of not formally minuting cabinet meetings. Now, I appreciate the cabinet is an important element of what goes on here, and that's been the case for some 14 years. But I wasn't aware, to be quite honest about it, that the minutes are not taken of cabinet meetings. I mean, we see the agenda, we know what's on the agenda, and eventually we know what the decisions are. But that it's not formally minuted, I'm inclined to agree that it should be, and this is what he's saying here. So are we going to head, so the question is, are we heading for a position where cabinet meetings will be minuted? Because there has to be an audit trail somewhere, isn't there?
I don't know if anyone here is able to speak to that particular issue. We've got a cabinet member.
I can offer a view, Chair. It's not my decision, but the view of Cabinet is that something that we shall agree to differ on. All of Cabinet meetings are live streamed. All of the agendas and all the background information are well known prior to the Cabinet meeting. We have a system whereby we allow questioning of Cabinet, which is not usual throughout Wales, but certainly takes place here. There's a decision log which is published. There's an awful lot of information given out about that cabinet meeting, and we think of formal minutes of it are just unnecessary. So that's Cabinet's collective view.
Thank you for that information. Obviously, hands are up now in response to this, so I'll go to Councillor Down.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up what Councillor Murphy says, the problem is not the actual decisions. The problem arises where commonly the leader, but sometimes other members, make announcements at Cabinet which are not part of the strict agenda or not part of the decision which is being made. And a minute would enable those announcements to be distributed more widely amongst members, rather than just, as I say, the strict agenda.
Thank you. And Councillor Prosser, were you wanting to respond to that?
Not on this topic, on a different section, if I may. it's recommendation P8 on page 9. I just want a bit of clarity, really. It says, develop the Council's workforce planning arrangements by including accurate data and key management information around workforce issues and statistics, reporting regularly to senior leadership and management teams to enable effective monitoring of progress and management of these issues on an ongoing basis. That says one of two things to me, and I'd like some clarity. Is that saying that workforce managers are not managing properly, or is it saying senior managers are out of the loop?
What it's saying is that the workforce as a whole is not, there's no strategy for how the workforce is going to be taken forward. To start off with, what we would expect to see with an organisation this size is a clear picture of the workforce, the profile of the organisation. Then you need to put that alongside where the organisation is going to, so that you know what the future needs of the council are going to be, and then you can start to have a plan as to how the workforce moves from where it is now to where it is in the future. And why this is important, an example of why this is important, is that if you think about a redundancy process, what you need to think about when you're making people redundant, either voluntarily or compulsorily, is whether you're letting the right people go. And if you don't have a proper workforce plan for the future, then I'm not sure how you can really decide which people you need to keep and which ones you don't. And similarly, it's about the development. You know, organisations are changing, technology is changing all the time, the way that services are being delivered is changing all the time. And therefore you need to develop your workforce in different ways. And shift resources around, and that's really what we're getting to, is that we just think there should be a clear picture of what the workforce looks like now and what it should look like in the future, and then a workforce plan as to how you're going to move to that end position. And I think if you look in the council's action plan, I think one of the actions for the chief executive is to set out the shape of the service delivery in the future. Once that's in place, then the council, as I understand it, will then move to looking at a proper workforce plan.
I understand.
And Councillor Murphy, did you have another question?
I was just going to comment on what Matthew said about the recording, particularly of social services, and pick up on the fact that the implementation of Flow, as it's called. This is the new handheld system where people could go around with tablets and make their report as they go along. Is working very, very effectively. The staff absolutely love it. Other authorities are all queuing up to have a look at it because they can see the benefit of taking it on themselves. So you never know, we may even be able to sell the system on, which would be very nice.
Right, well, thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions people wish to raise at this point? In which case I suggest we agree to note the report and thank Mr. Gatehouse and Mr. Wilson for their contributions today. Thank you very much. Okay.
Excuse me?
Yes, of course. You're welcome to stay, but you probably don't want to.
We'll watch the live stream back on.
Oh, yes, you will. The next item we've got on the agenda is the Internal Audit Q3 Progress Report. Mr. Wathen.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This is one of the regular reports I bring to the Audit Committee. It's in twofold. Firstly, on the assurance on the adequacy of the internal control environment and the audit opinions we've issued up to the 31st of December. And the second part is the performance of the audit team. So hopefully members by now are familiar with the reporting style and the data enclosed. So I'm not going to go through in a lot of detail, just to give you the sort of headline figures. In terms of finalisation of the previous year's work, which is on paragraph 4.4, there's a mixed bag of opinions, but generally pretty good for 14-15 work that we were finalising. So it would have been draft as at the 31st of March 2015, and we've subsequently finalised that work in 15-16. So there's a good range of opinions. mainly positive opinions from previous audit work, which hopefully will give members assurance that the adequacy of the internal control environment is good. In terms of 14-15 work, we've issued a number of audit opinions, 25 audit jobs which we've issued to at least draft report stage. As at 31st of December, 3 were good audit opinions, 3 were reasonable audit opinions. The other audits didn't really warrant an audit opinion, and we were given out financial advice, got involved with some grant claims, and we incorporate the annual governance statement within that workload as well. And that's the detail of that is shown at the appendix, which I'll come on to in a moment. We've also been involved with some special investigations, and 9 special investigations to date, which can be quite time consuming, quite sensitive, and one in particular has had a bit of an impact on our workload, which I'll come on to in a moment, and our performance indicators. In terms of the performance of the team, as the council has already referred to, we've hit 40% of our audit plan as at 31st of December, where the target was around 50%. So we're below the target, and we're below where we were last year, primarily because of our involvement with the special investigation. What happens is myself and the audit manager get involved with the special investigation, and we deal with the officers concerned. We do a lot of data analysis. That means we can't give our time then to the audit planned work. So the work is being done, but because we need to comply with the professional standards, it's not going through a quality review process as quickly as we'd like. So that's the bit of the backlog, really. So in terms of completing the audit plan, we're slightly low, and in getting reports out in a timely manner, that's also had an impact, where we're getting draft reports out around about 50 days, and final reports out, I think, just bear with me a sec. In 30 days, having received the comments from the operational managers. That doesn't look very good. Myself and the audit manager will keep on the case with that, and we'll be reviewing it. But given that we've now got a full complement of staff, and I say that very quickly because every time I say that to the audit committee, it changes. For 16-17 going forward, we should be in a better position, so our performance indicators should be better. So if I can refer members to the appendix 1 on page 107 of your pack, outlines the individual jobs that we've undertaken in 15-16, gives the audit opinion on the right hand side. As you can see, so far no unsatisfactory or unsounds, which hopefully will give you assurance that things are working well. I've also been involved with grant claims where we've issued an unqualified opinion. That means that the terms and conditions of that grant claim have been applied with, and the money's been spent in a true and fair way. Next page goes on to where we've issued audit advice, been involved with various systems updates, particular issues that operational managers may have, and just want advice in terms of sound financial management. Skipping then to Appendix 3, I've outlined the performance of the team by quarter and by year, so you can give a good comparison. And as quarter 3 is highlighted in the 2 tables comparing 2014-15 and 2015-16. Happy to take questions, Chairman.
Any questions or observations from those present? Yes, Councillor.
As I alluded to in the previous item, concern about backlog in internal audit. I have sympathy. Your team has been understaffed in recent years. The market to replace those staff hasn't been there. That's pretty much what was the response over the years. And you've had special investigations which take up a huge amount of time, and I understand that. I'm just concerned about stuff that's been kicked on each year because of because of understaffing and special investigations, are we getting a point where the backlog is getting just growing and growing and growing and becoming unmanageable? What's, you know, is that concern to you? Should be a concern to us regarding this matter? Because I think, you know, given what WAO have said about other systems, you know, there's more and more to do, and there might be more special investigations. Have you got the resources as well to help you sort of make sure the system's effective?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. At the moment, there's me, part-time Chief Internal Auditor, and there's 5 members of the audit team. So we're fully staffed, and we've got 1 audit manager, 1 principal auditor, and 2 senior auditors and an auditor. Every year we review the audit plan, the audit universe. So we do have a strategic audit plan of what we hope to cover with those resources over a period of time. And we have an operational audit plan, which is what we prioritise in year. So every financial year that is prioritised. At the beginning of the year, around about this time, for 16-17, the audit manager and myself will sit down and go through the operational plan and go through the strategic plan and reprioritise things. So, and we'll take on board comments from heads of service and other operational managers as well to see where they think the risks are, and the risk profile changes from year to year. So when we've gone through that process, and there's a number of criteria we've used to prioritise jobs in the following year's operational plan, we present a draft plan, and we circulate that to heads of service and obviously to head of finance, and then we bring it to the audit committee to see if you're happy with that as well. Generally you are, and then we work on that for the rest of the year. Sometimes priorities change within year, so we may have to change jobs within year, but we try and accommodate that the best we can. So I think, in short, the answer to your question is we do look at the jobs that are backlogged, and we reprioritise that given the resources we've got. Sometimes they move up the ladder, sometimes they move down the ladder, sometimes they become a lower risk, so they then get put back and back. There's some jobs which we'll never do because they are low risk to start with, and they continue to be low risked. But when we do our planning process, we allocate a risk to individual jobs, which could be high, medium or low. And if it's a higher risk, it gets a higher priority, and therefore we would more likely to do a high risk review than a low risk review.
About resources as well, do you feel like you have the resources necessary to do the job adequately?
Given the plan we put together, we've got sufficient resource to complete the plan, given the fair wind and no additional special investigations. That gives you assurance, hopefully, on the adequacy of the internal control environment, the governance arrangement and risk management. If we had more resources, we could have greater coverage across the authority and therefore give you greater assurance. It's a balance, really, of what I'm comfortable with, what Joy as Head of Finance is comfortable with, and I guess what you as Audit Committee are comfortable with as well.
Councillor Prosser.
Yes, just carrying on that theme. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to say that you've got a scheduled amount of work, and that this year you've had more special investigations. So obviously special investigations take you away from the scheduled work. I'm just curious, is there a theme to these special investigations? I mean, you've got a blip by the sound of it. And is there any background to that blip? Is it going to disappear, or is it something more significant?
Thank you, Chairman. I think that's, I'd like to think it's a blip. We do allocate a certain amount of days for special investigations every year to take out to the plan. Over the last few years, we've exceeded that, but it's not in a particular area. It's not a theme. We get wind of allegations, either direct contact with me, anonymous allegations that come through to me, or as part of our routine audit work, we identify some issues which are not quite right, so therefore we follow it up, which subsequently leads on to a special investigation. So they come to us in a number of ways. I think going back across the type of specials we've been involved with over the last few years, there's no real theme. There's nothing really that is something we need to concentrate on as an authority. They just happen across service areas.
Thanks for that. Unless there are any other comments and observations, I propose that we note the report. Thank you very much. And I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is titled Scrutiny Performance Report. And I think Hazel Eilert is here to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual report that you receive around this time each year or towards the latter part of the year. I'm here today to present the Scrutiny Service Plan. That's 2015 to 2018, but it's updated at Q2, shortly due to be updated at the end of January for Q3. The reason I'm bringing you the plan is so that the Audit Committee can monitor the performance of the function and assess the fitness of purpose of our current scrutiny arrangements. Recommendations to you are to consider the robustness of the service plan, to consider the scrutiny milestones that I've attached as Appendix B, in order that you're satisfied that we're ensuring continuous improvement in the function. Also provided within your papers, Chair, is the recent response to the recommendations made to all Welsh authorities following the WAO scrutiny study of 2013. And also considered in the pack is the views of the WAO on scrutiny in Monmouthshire following our recent corporate assessment. So just a bit of background, Chair, I'll take you through the report that the WAO study of 2013 is still relevant because it required every council in Wales to produce a scrutiny action plan and to report on that in due course. We've chosen to build that into the Council's reporting framework, so the Scrutiny Action Plan is actually the service plan for the function. The study had a peer observation and 2 self-evaluations, one at the start and one at the end of the study, and that led to the action plan. In terms of the action plan, which is the business plan, this is monitored continuously. As I say, it's updated quarterly and the function is held to account through that plan. That plan is challenged at a strategic level by the performance and improvement officers that you've spoken to already today. It's challenged by yourselves as Audit Committee, and also the operational challenge for that plan occurs through the Scrutiny Chairs Liaison Group and also management review. We're also accountable to the community, as you know, because all our scrutiny meetings are live streamed across the internet. The service plan feeds into our council's performance and improvement framework, as I've advised. That wasn't statutory, but we decided to do it that way to ensure that it's continuously challenged. And this then is the key document upon which the Wales Audit Office continued to monitor our progress. Obviously, they've made some other recommendations to scrutiny following that study, and they've done that through the corporate assessment, and they are due to return in January to cover some outstanding issues. Those are not briefed in this report, Chair, because we received the brief after the papers had gone to you for agenda dispatch, but I can give you a brief run through those areas, some of which have already been touched on today. There are concerns with data quality and report writing, as we've discussed, clarity of targets. Obviously, Matthew Gatehouse has answered from a performance data quality point of view, but in terms of scrutiny, I'd like to reassure the committee that there are steps that we are taking to address this. The first step is to train officers on report writing. We've actually done that with one department so far, and it's proved very, very useful, and the report writing has improved as a result. The other mechanism is to introduce some filters. For example, reports will routinely be taken through departmental management teams to act as a filter to ensure that they are fit for purpose. If they're strategic reports, they'll also be considered by the senior leadership team. When reports come through to scrutiny, they'll come to myself, and if there are concerns, the chair and myself can send the reports back before they appear on an agenda. So that's the efforts to improve some of the quality in terms of report writing and what is brought to members. One of the other concerns that was raised during the corporate assessment visit in terms of scrutiny arrangements was member attendance, cabinet member attendance at scrutiny meetings. We've had a scrutiny protocol in place, scrutiny executive protocol in place for several years now, and that clearly outlines the roles of cabinet members and states that they will attend a scrutiny meeting when requested, but they are not obligated to be at each and every scrutiny committee. However, what we are looking to do, and we have actually completed some of this during December, is to have a meeting with cabinet members to explain the actual implementation of the protocol. And one of the meetings that we've trialled by using this sort of protocol is the budget scrutiny meeting, the joint budget scrutiny meeting in December, where we had cabinet members and officers clearly answering different questions. Cabinet members answering questions on policy and officers being there just for technical expertise questions. This seems to have improved the understanding of cabinet member roles, and we will continue to work with the executive on this. One of the other areas that was flagged up by the WAO, which they will want to discuss with us in January, is how cabinet consider items that have been brought to scrutiny. As you'll know, often chairs write letters to the cabinet members in terms of specific recommendations made by scrutiny, but I think there was a need for a regular report on the cabinet agenda which details all the outcomes and recommendations from the scrutiny committees. We've commenced this, Chair, and the most recent one was taken to Cabinet last week, and we also were doing this back in July, and this is a process that we intend to continue. In terms of the items going forward, Chair, and the progress of the function, I don't intend to talk you through the appendices, but the appendices do show that we've delivered some key things this year, namely the scrutiny handbook, a scrutiny website, and a comprehensive member development programme, which I can talk to you about in more depth if needs be. The one thing that, aside from the WAO visit, the one thing that members do need to be aware, and it's not included in this report because it's subject of a council decision next week, is the scrutiny arrangements for future generations and public service board scrutiny. I've put together a proposal. There are several options within that proposal. They will be detailed in the cabinet report that will be discussed by council next week on the 21st of January. They have been discussed with the political leadership group and also the scrutiny chairs liaison group, and that is now the next stage of the process. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Right, well, do we have any questions or observations? Yes, Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Hazel. Several years ago, Council made a decision to reduce the attendance numbers required at scrutiny meetings. Yet I see that the scrutiny meetings have increased over the last number of years, in fact 17 in 13 and 10 in 14. Is the effectiveness of scrutiny being watered down by having less members coming at meetings? Because it seems to me then that the less members appointed to a meeting, very few, there's quite a few occasions, quite a few don't turn up. So is scrutiny going downwards or upwards on the basis of the decisions taken some years ago? And do you believe that there are too many instances of special meetings? What is happening? Why is it falling down? I suggest it may be falling down.
Okay. I don't believe that scrutiny is falling down. I believe that scrutiny has become far more effective than it has over the number of years. I do agree that the membership of scrutiny committees has been reduced, but I don't actually think that there is an overall reduction in the numbers of members attending scrutiny. So when we had 11 on the committee, we might have 7 members present. We now have 9 on a committee, and we might have 6 or 7 members present. So I actually think that it's helped the situation because members are spreading their time now according to their sort of capacity. In terms of the number of special meetings, yes, we have an awful lot more special meetings than previously, and the reason for this is that there is a lot of work taking place. In the past, we had the luxury of time to have task and finish groups on the issues, but the pace of change and the type of work that is coming through in what is a very dynamic council environment means that in order to scrutinise properly, we're focusing much more on pre-decision scrutiny and scrutiny of proposals ahead of cabinet decision, as opposed to long, in-depth investigations, which sometimes can miss the boat in terms of their impact. The workload for the CYP Select Committee was obviously quite heavy due to the EST inspection and a lot more reports coming through for that committee. But I think also you need to bear in mind that the responsibilities for scrutiny are also increasing. And with that, that brings in the dimension of the Future Generations Act, the requirement to scrutinise public sector bodies. This has increased the workload for scrutiny, there's absolutely no doubt about it, Chair, and I think it's something that we need to keep a watching brief on. But the members that are on select committees are aware of this and they're committed. I know that I have a core group of scrutineers that I can call on at any time to scrutinise any issue, and I do find that in this council there's a real commitment and enthusiasm for scrutiny from non-opposition members and party members. We don't have party politics in our meetings, and I feel that actually the members here are very committed to scrutiny.
I'm very glad to receive such a positive report. But Councillor Petrini.
Yes, thank you, Hazel, for your report, and I agree. Scrutiny has improved over the years immeasurably. I have a few questions. First, on your evaluation, the format of the evaluation form. I notice it's about impact and success and so on. I know later on down at the final bit of it, you've put bullet points of areas of continued improvement, but would it be more helpful, I think I would find it more helpful for areas of weakness or failures, including the evaluation table rather than bullet points at the bottom. So it clearly outlining where it hasn't gone quite so well and why it hasn't gone quite so well. I'd appreciate that so I can be able to see the balanced view on the evaluation front. On a try to copy page 122, it says that it was highly successful public engagement on the budget scrutiny. Can you please define to me what highly successful means with the public engaging with budget scrutiny? Please tell me it's not likes on Facebook or Twitter engagements. Maybe it is, I don't know, but I would appreciate that. I was pleased to hear you predicated your speech about listening to the WAO about effectiveness of performance and performance indicators. And I read in the plan that it's to support members in analysing performance information. Are you confident that the information you're getting is robust? Because it seems to be, it might not be in every instance. And I notice in one of those tables, you've mentioned targets performance indicators set nationally. I know we set local indicators as well. Do we look at them? And do we look at the robustness of them? Without robust data, isn't the scrutiny process flawed?
Okay, Chair, I'll take each of the questions in turn. I think the first point was around the sort of format of the service plan. Our weaknesses are actually our areas for continued focus. There is a section in there on that, but this plan is due to be updated as Q3 at the end of January, so I could certainly make that more obvious if that's helpful to members. In terms of the second point around budget scrutiny engagement, as you know, the Council does engage quite heavily with the public on the budget proposals in advance of them being considered. So, yes, they do discuss those on Facebook, Twitter. They have lots of consultation events, which Councillor Murphy could tell you a lot more about than myself. But I'm just answering in terms of the budget engagement through the scrutiny process. My view on that is that actually we do engage with the public on budget scrutiny matters. I can give you an example. The Strong Communities Select Committee have discussed grounds maintenance and roadside verge maintenance with members of the public at length over the course of the last year. So when they formed their stance and scrutinised those within the budget round, their views were heavily influenced by the feedback that they'd received from various members of the community who came to meetings, spoke at scrutiny meetings and took part. You might not be aware, but not all councils in Wales, in fact, I don't actually know of any others besides ourselves that have public open forums on all of our ordinary scrutiny meetings, and we enable the public to actually take part and speak at meetings, and also to take part and speak in call-in processes, which is not something that's widespread. In terms of the robustness of information, it has been a concern. In terms of the business plan and the comments on that in the business plan, I would say that because we are actually near Q3, Chair, I feel those concerns have actually been addressed some time ago. These concerns were particularly identified in relation to some of the data that was coming forward for the Children and Young People Select Committee. I had specific concerns then, and I've worked with the EAS and with officers in the CYP department to improve the quality of data that's coming forward to members. I also work quite closely with Mr Gatehouse and the other improvement officers in bringing the information forward to scrutiny. And of course we do look at national indicators but also local indicators. The type of performance reports that we get to scrutiny have a scorecard approach, and they also have a narrative which explains the background behind some of the data, because I think it's sometimes not easy for members to just see from facts and figures what the actual trends are, but indeed what the outcomes are for citizens in Monmouthshire. And it's that narrative that provides really useful context for members in order to understand whether people are actually better off.
Thanks very much. I had a question from Councillor Prosser.
Well, it's a comment under the question, really, because I'm the scrutiny champion for the councillors in this authority, and I commend the officer for all the hard work that goes in, and I've seen a gradual improvement, if you like, from I was first elected in 2008. And the scrutiny committee I went on then to the scrutiny committee I go on today are totally different animals, in my opinion. With the scrutiny, it's all about effective and relevant information. Then it's robust challenge, an appropriate challenge, and then it's outcomes. And that's the focus that we've got to keep our minds on all the time. And we are making progress in all those areas, in my opinion. And I do challenge the manager from time to time, and she's kept on her toes, if you like, because I ask the questions that the local person would ask. Why aren't you? And this, etc. So it's a good news story as far as scrutiny is concerned. I've got one question, because a few things sort of evolve which worry me from time to time. And there's been a plethora of meetings over the last 6 months. And I've seen, meetings backing onto each other, special meetings, extra meetings. And I think to myself that, are we scrutinising the right portfolios? So there's a question to the officer, really, that in 2, 3, 4 years' time, will we be scrutinising the same sort of portfolios? We've got extra ones coming along, which is the service boards and all the other organisations, which have to fit in. And it's the balance of effective scrutiny against, we've had comments about the number of people on committees, and the time they spend on it. Well, a few people doing a heck of a lot of work, and a few people doing hardly any work, you've got to get a balance in there somewhere. So I asked the officer, does she see any movement in that area in the foreseeable future?
Thank you for the question. I do believe that we are appropriately set up in terms of our scrutiny arrangements. Some councils have scrutiny committees that are directorate focused. We moved away from that a long time ago for a specific reason, in that our workload is cross-cutting. We cannot allocate certain policies, certain decisions to different departments, but more importantly, we need to be outward looking. We cannot simply have committees that look inside the council at specific service areas. So we've got 4 select committees that are cross-cutting, and those are able to look outside at business activity, at economic growth. They can pursue sort of wider direction as well as holding the council to account. They can also bring in, and they have been bringing in, external bodies such as the Health Board to hold those to account, and also other businesses, chambers of commerce are involved in some of our select committee meetings. So they are much more outward focused than I think in some other councils. So I think our fitness for purpose is correct. I do believe that the workload is going to increase, as it naturally would with Welsh Government's legislation around future generations public service board scrutiny. And as I say, I've put together a proposal of how we can manage this best, and that will go to council next week. In terms of capacity of members, that is always a concern of mine, but we do have very dedicated scrutiny members here, and I believe sometimes that actually it's not so much the numbers that count, but it's the quality of the scrutiny that takes place in those meetings. And sometimes if a meeting has been called at short notice and perhaps we haven't got a full complement of that committee, I don't believe that it actually hinders the scrutiny, because we've got committed members, they understand their role, they understand their purpose, they know very well how to cross-examine and challenge officers and cabinet members, and we get the job done. In terms of our resources, yes, we do have fewer resources than other councils, but we work in a very different way to other councils. We work in a streamlined way. We're much more efficient, I believe, in delivering our scrutiny priorities than other better resourced councils. And members here get a sort of highly efficient functional scrutiny support service. But going back to the question around what our priorities are, our priorities are to support members and develop the members so that they can do the job effectively, and it's about focusing on scrutiny of the right issues at the right time. And that takes me back to my earlier point about the fact that we are doing much more pre-decision scrutiny and holding to account now, because the pace of change is such that that is the best way for us to scrutinise. So I believe that we are putting our time into the right areas and we're scrutinising them in the right way.
Thanks very much for that. I can see Councillor Pross is about to come in. I know that children and young persons are banging on the door at the moment, so I'm just wondering whether it would be appropriate to say we're going to wrap this up. Oh, right, we don't have to wrap it up then. So, Councillor Pross.
I was just going to say thank you for that comprehensive reply, and then carry on with the good work.
Well, my thoughts exactly. Yes, thank you very much. So, any more observations or comments? In which case, I'll suggest that we agree to thank you for your report, and we'll note the report. Thank you very much, and we look forward to you reporting on further progress in time. Okay, well, that just leads us on then to the forward work programme, which is there. I'm always glad to see it. I'm glad it's been reinstated. Unless there are any comments on that, all I need to do is just note that the date and time of the next meeting is going to be the 3rd of March at 2 o'clock. Thanks very much, everyone.